working towards, and we're very much excited to share it with our community as well. So to start, I'm going to let Nathan kind of go over just a very quick, brief overview of this program. For many of our states that don't have tax credit programs, this is a very new concept. So it's good to continue educating on how this works and how it's going to benefit our community. So I'll turn it over to Nathan.
Thank you, Sydney. It's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you, Kevin, Deputy Assistant Secretary Kevin, for joining us. Very briefly, just to set the table, so those of you who are less familiar will follow Kevin's remarks. This is really, we're counting down the months, the weeks to the launch, the actual implementation in January of 2027 of this exciting new opportunity to fund education in the United States. Congress passed and President Trump signed last July the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, a massive piece of tax legislation. And what was contained in there was the creation of this brand new federal tax credit for contributions to scholarship granting organizations. And in a nutshell, what it does, it allows every individual taxpayer to contribute $1,700 to a scholarship granting organization and basically receive all of that money back in the form of a 100% tax credit against what they would otherwise owe in federal taxes when they file them the following year. The scholarship organizations can raise an unlimited amount of money. They just have to do it $1,700 at a time. And that's why this has such tremendous potential. And the scholarship granting organizations have to be freestanding organizations, charitable 501(c)(3)s that are providing scholarships to students at least two different schools. There are also some income requirements for the kinds of families and students that can receive scholarships from the funds that are raised. But it is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for our community, the Jewish community, and other communities, whether it's faith communities like the Catholics and others, and also, frankly, the public school sector as well, to generate and galvanize incredible resources, as we've seen, as Sydney and the Teach people have led at the state level in places like Florida, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere. There are a lot of open questions as to the mechanics of this because Congress can't write all the details into a piece of legislation, and that's where the U.S. Department of the Treasury comes in. And so the implementing regulations are the next crucial step. We at OU Advocacy have been partnering with Sydney and Teach to advocate to Treasury about how to hopefully make those regulations best serve the goals that we are all trying to accomplish. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So back to you, Sydney, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, there is a Q&A box down at the bottom. I do want to let people ask questions. And while we are still waiting for the full regulations, not everything was shared with us, is going to be shared today. And Kevin doesn't have all the answers for every single regulation. So the things that he's going to share is what he has. And if you have questions, he or us can elaborate on some of them. But there are going to be questions, I can assume, that still cannot be answered, but we will do our best. But I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to kind of talk about the top line items that were released on Tuesday.
Great, thank you, Sydney and Nathan, and I'm very thankful for UOA and Teach Coalition's advocacy and leadership in this area. I mean, you've gathered 130 plus people on this one Zoom call, so it really shows all the hard work that you're doing. So thank you for that. So as Nathan mentioned, Treasury, together with the IRS, is responsible for issuing guidance, implementing the tax provisions in the entire working families tax cuts, including the new federal scholarship tax credit. I am a tax lawyer. As a tax lawyer, I did not come to Treasury expecting to find myself quite so immersed in education policy. But since the enactment of this credit, this has become one of the most important and exciting implementation projects that we are working on. And it's given me the opportunity to work with people like those on this call, and I'm very grateful for that. So first, just to orient, I want to say that clearly that this administration supports educational freedom, parental choice, and faith-based education. This is, coming from the top down, from President Trump, from Secretary Bessent. Jewish day schools and yeshivas should be full participants in this program. Now, I want to give a more detailed sense of where Treasury and the IRS are focused as we work to get guidance out that is clear and administrable for a successful 2027 launch. So we expect to issue proposed regulations no later than the end of September. I'm doing everything I can to speed it up as best I can, but no later than the end of September. States, SGOs, and taxpayers will be able to rely on those proposed regulations for 2027. So we'll do proposed regs, there will be a notice and comment period, and ultimately the regs will be finalized. But for 2027, what comes out in the proposed, those are the rules that you can rely on, and they won't change. We do recognize the need to plan, and so there's been a lot of questions, and so that's why we did earlier this week, we did a guidance preview. I'll summarize some of the highlight points from that here, and then happy to take some questions. So we heard a lot about the 90% spending requirement. So SGOs need to spend at least 90% of the income of the organization on scholarships for eligible students under the statute. We're providing a safe harbor here. So if the nonprofit's activities are largely scholarship granting activities and not, unrelated other activities, then the organization can have a separate segregated 25F account. And for purposes of that 90% test, you only look at the income, the qualified contributions and the earnings that are in that segregated account. And for a multi-state SGO, that safe harbor would have to be satisfied separately for each state-specific segregated account. So this really helps make dealing with startup expenses more manageable and dealing with multi-state SGOs more manageable. We've gotten a lot of questions as to what it means for an SGO to be located in a particular state. So we're going to be defining located in as being authorized to do business in a particular state and complying with any generally applicable state charitable organization rules. So we had heard concerns that we might require SGOs to be physically present in every state in which they, in every state's list in which they were on. We're not going that direction. So long as you are authorized to do business, then you can be on the list. At the same time, we had heard a lot of concerns that states could impose additional requirements on SGOs beyond the federal requirements, such as the SGO can only support public schools or secular private schools or something like that. That is not how we read the statute, and the guidance will be clear that states may not impose substantive SGO-specific requirements that are more restrictive than the federal statute's requirements. On multi-state SGOs, a lot of those exist already in other contexts, and that's a good thing, and we want that to continue. So the proposed regulations will provide that an SGO may be listed in more than one participating state SGO list, so long as it is located in that state, again, meaning authorized to do business in that state, and it maintains the separate segregated account for that state. So again, we think that should really open the door for broader coalitions across many states. Next, we'd heard questions about the definition of school for purposes of eligible expenses. So we expect the proposed rules will define school consistent with the statute, section 530, to include public, private, and religious schools providing K through 12 elementary or secondary education as determined under state law. Accordingly, a homeschool would be treated as a school if it is treated as a school under state law, as it is in many states. Many, but not all. We also heard a lot of questions about student income eligibility thresholds. So the statute requires that an eligible student who receives a scholarship must be a member of a household with an income no greater than 300% of the area median gross income. And we heard a lot of concerns about the administrability of that and how do you verify that. So one option is just direct documentation. So the SGO would be able to verify students' household income by looking at pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns, or you can verify it through one of the large crediting agencies or other commercial data sources. We also recognize that especially some lower income families may struggle with some of the paperwork. So we'll be providing a number of safe harbors. So if a member of the household participates in a needs-based federal, state, or tribal program with income limits at or below that specified 300% threshold, then they would automatically qualify. In addition, foster children will be per se eligible with no additional income verification required. And in particularly low income areas, we're also considering whether other safe harbors might be appropriate and consistent with the statute. We're also focused on fraud and abuse. We want this system to be, we want this tax credit and the scholarships to be widely adopted and to be generous and to be effective, but we also want the public to trust the system. If there's fraud and abuse, that's not going to be good for anybody in the long run. At the same time, we recognize that states need to certify the list of eligible SGOs. And we heard concerns from states that they might have to build a whole new office of people who audit these SGOs and do due diligence on them and ask all these questions. And then there's appropriations questions. So we have to kind of straddle the line between simplicity of administration, but also preventing fraud. So many nonprofits already get an annual financial audit due to state charities bureau requirements or other oversight requirements that they may be subject to. So what we'll be requiring SGOs to do is to, in addition to whatever regular financial audit they get, they will also need to have an auditor, a third-party auditor, whether it's a licensed CPA or another appropriate third-party person, verify that the SGO in fact complies with the federal statutory requirements. That would result in, a short audit report. That audit report would be signed by the auditor and sent to the state. The state can then look at that and use it as a tool in their certification process. They can look at the audit, see everything appears to be in good order, and then include the SGO on their state list. So again, it's intended to make things more manageable while also preventing bad actors from abusing the system. Let's see. And then the only other thing that I'll mention before going to some questions is there is a statutory list of eligible expenses that scholarships may be used for. Tuition is the obvious one, and we expect that would be a large percentage of scholarships would go towards tuition, but it can go towards a lot of other things as well. So it can go towards books and supplies and tutoring and special needs services and a whole host of other things. The statute is pretty clear as to what it can be used for, but we'll be providing additional clarity and guidance because, again, we're hearing a lot of questions, particularly from some of the folks that have dealt with state programs where there's gray areas and people don't know whether this expense is in or out. So we'll be providing as much clarity as we can. That's kind of a brief overview. Happy to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Kevin. The number one question that many people are asking, 1,700 versus 3,400. What is your answer on that?
Yeah, so on that question, we have certainly heard that question as well, and we've heard the legal arguments on both sides of that. We do not have anything to announce at this time on that question. We will need to, or we are looking closely at the statute and the legal arguments on each side of this issue. And when the proposed regs come out, we'll have an answer to that question that is grounded in the statute.
Thank you. Had to get the most asked one out of the way. One thing I just want to touch on is the public school aspect. Many governors in the states, in the Democratic states that we work in, their number one thing is we want to make sure that the public schools are part of this. And I just want to like give it one more shout of confidence from you, saying that public schools are indeed, in fact, in this, and there should be no worry. Correct?
100% public schools are in this. I heard some when we had the roundtable, one of the panelists cited an interesting statistic, which is in one state that was polled, if people were given the choice of donating to an SGO that contributes to or that provides scholarships to public school students only versus private school students only, I think it was 3-1 would have donated to SGOs that give exclusively to public schools rather than exclusively to private schools. So there is demand, there will be supply, there will be a broad marketplace of SGOs that develop. There will be SGOs that service the Jewish community, the Catholic community, and everybody else. And it's going to be exciting to see that marketplace develop.
Yes, absolutely. And on the SGO front, is there, I think this was in the legislation, SGOs have to give to a minimum of 2 schools. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, yes. Yeah.
Okay, going through some of these questions. Will there be any formal audit to follow for the federal audit?
Any formal audit to follow for the federal? Sorry, can you say more about the question?
I think maybe they're asking about what's the state auditing look like that will go towards like how is the state going to show the federal government what's happening in the state? That's what I would
Got
assume.
it. Yeah.
And I think that's a good question to ask anyways.
Yeah. Okay. So again, each SGO will be required to get a third-party audit. We will for small SGOs, and this is consistent with other oversight regimes. Small SGOs will have an alternative streamlined process whereby they don't need to, engage an outside auditor. They can have a panel of people who do an alternative audit procedure and then sign off on it under penalties of perjury and provide that in lieu of a full third-party audit. But in general, the larger ones will need to get a true third-party audit. They will provide the audit results to the state, and then the state will use that to certify their list that they provide to the IRS. And then once the list is provided to the IRS, then it's locked in and it's certified for the year.
Thank you. A few questions on the tax credit versus tax deduction. I think there's still some questions on how does it work when you give your money and then when you file your taxes. Can you talk us through that process and what the credit versus deduction is?
Yeah, so ordinarily when you give, like let's say you make a $1,700 contribution to any nonprofit, you would get a deduction of $1,700. Here, where you make a $1,700 contribution to an eligible SGO, rather than getting the deduction for $1,700, you instead get a dollar-for-dollar credit against your taxes for the $1,700. So let's say that on July 1st of 2027, I gave $1,700 to an eligible SGO. Then when I file my taxes at the end of the year for 2027, I would get, and let's say I owed $2,000 in taxes, I would get a $1,700 reduction in my tax liability. So I only owe $300 in taxes. So I'm out of pocket $1,700, but I get the full amount back when I file my taxes at the end of the year. So there's absolutely no reason for every taxpayer in the country not to make an annual $1,700 donation. And it's going to be very important for all of the educational communities that are out there and all communities that are out there, to have that be part of the regular rhythm of their annual communications with the members in their communities. Just, every single year, remember to give your $1,700 to one of the to an SGO that resonates with you.
But if I could just add one point that people might want to know is the SGOs are still, nonprofit 501(c)(3). So you get the full credit for the first 1,700, but if somebody, let's say, gives $2,000 to the SGO, they get a $1,700 dollar for dollar credit, and then the $300 on top of that will still be a charitable contribution like any other charitable contribution, and you'll get a tax deduction, which how valuable that is depends on what your tax rate is, but it's still, beneficial to raise those or contribute those extra dollars.
Yes. And what if no one, if what if a person has no tax liability?
I believe, and Nathan might know this more quickly than I do. I think there's a carry forward on this credit. Is that right?
There's a carry
Yes.
forward for the organizations. It's not a refundable credit, though.
No, it's not. It's not a refundable credit, but if you don't have enough tax liability in a given year,
Right.
I think you can carry it forward for up to 5 years.
There you go.
Right.
Lots and lots of questions. We're definitely not going to get to all of these. We will, you can email us at information@teachcoalition.org and we will get you your answers. We are not, this is a very, a very interested crowd. So this is great. Let me go through a few. Okay. I don't know if you're going to have the answer to this. Actually, you'll have the answer to this one and then I'll give you the hard one. I'll give you the easy one. The area median income, is that where the student lives or where the school is located?
I, oh gosh, very good question. You're
Oh
asking
no, now I'm not gonna ask
multiple
my next one
questions.
then.
No, I think it's where the student lives, but I will pull up the statute.
I'm
Nathan,
also pretty
do
sure
you
it's
know
where
that
the
one off the top of your head?
I think it's where the student
It's
lives.
it's where the student lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
There's a lot of questions on here that I know have not been answered in the regulation, so I'm not going to give you any hardballs. If people have questions, please send them to us and we keep them in mind. A lot of these questions, like Nathan said at the very beginning, and Kevin, we've submitted comments to what we believe need to be addressed in regulations, and a lot of the questions here we have put forth. And just because we're having this conversation with new information on regulations, again, does not mean that all the information is out. So there are some questions that we just don't know yet. Let me find one or two more. There are a lot of questions, though, about SGOs being created nationally, locally, who's doing what. I do want to say that Teach Coalition and the OU are working with well-known national other Jewish organizations to make sure that every single Jewish community across the US has the correct SGO and implementation as possible, whether that looks like a national SGO, a local SGO. But please know that we are working behind the scenes with other national organizations to ensure that every single school and student has the ability to have an access to an SGO, and we hope to have more information in the future. And the fact that these new regulations came out saying that you can have a national SGO is very, very good for our community to have. I want to keep us on our 30-minute time frame. Nathan, is there anything else you would like to add?
Um, I think some people, because we have people from across the country on this, might be interested to hear. There's been some discussion about how it work if a student resides in one state but attends school actually in another state, right? You happen to live close to a state border,
That was my
um,
hardball
and
question, but
and
you went for it.
while you're making clear in the preview that we can have a national SGO, and let's say you have a national SGO that's authorized to operate both in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, um, is I don't recall if you related in your preview um, as to whether you're explicitly addressing that scenario.
So we will address that in the proposed regulations. I did not give a specific preview on this.
Okay.
So that, I mean, the statute does say that qualified contributions are contributions to SGOs that use the contribution to fund scholarships for eligible students solely within the state in which the organization is listed. So that is the relevant statutory language that we are taking a look at with regard to that question.
Right. Okay.
Fine, I'll give you one more question. Automatic payroll deduction from taxpayer payrolls, companies, all of that. Where is there any discussion on that?
So let's see. If a I'm getting slightly into the benefits tax lane, which is not my area of expertise, but I think so long as well, you wouldn't be able to double dip on the benefits if that's the question. So you wouldn't be able to take it out pre-tax and get the credit. But if it's taken out of post-tax income, then I don't see why there couldn't be a the manner in which the contribution is made shouldn't affect your eligibility for the credit.
Great. Okay, there's a lot of questions. There's still, like I said at the beginning, and we've all said, there's still a lot of questions that cannot be answered, but please send them over because it helps us show Treasury and Kevin and his whole team what people are thinking about. And it's amazing that we have Kevin here to kind of break it down for us. And so we thank him again for being available to this community for not just these webinars, but also when we have questions, Nathan and I, and when we're having roundtable discussions. Really, it's an amazing piece to have our community at the table. So we thank him and we thank the Department of Treasury. Again, please email us any other questions and we will get to them. We also have our FAQs on our website, which we will start to update as new information comes in. Teachcoalition.org/federal scholarships. Very easy to remember. And we thank you all for joining, and we will hopefully have good news on new opt-ins with these new revelations of regulation. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Nathan. And everyone have a great Shabbos.
Thank you very much.